Hello, I'm Benjamin, the Artistic Director at Hexachords, and in this video series I'm going to be taking you over how to get a track from this to something as refined as this. Hello everyone, I'm Benjamin, Artistic Director at Hexachords, and in this video, part 2 of how to compose an Orb Composer. So, in this video, we're going to be covering a lot of things that we didn't cover in part 1, which is how we really want to get this track that you see in front of you for things that we can work with professionally in a DAW to get to a final well-produced output. Now, I realize that my first track, my first EDM track, it's not my very first EDM track, but it's been a while since I've done EDM music, and I'm an orchestral composer by trade, so I'm doing the best I can with the knowledge that I have. So I apologize if my music is not up to snuff. So that's not entirely the fault of Orb Composer, though Orb Composer does have some limitations with regard to EDM. But certainly, going forward, I'm going to be spending a great deal more time studying and detailing more about this. But what I really want to stress here is how I got that track that you can hear by clicking the eye on the screen to go and listen to the final produced track. And then also, if you click the second eye on the screen that will appear right now, you can also take a look at part 1 of this video, where we actually talked about just how to get the structure of this built. So here's what I know about what I wanted to do with this track. I wanted to build small, start small, and work my way up. I wanted to start with a soft pad, and I wanted to work my way up with my synths, and then arpeggiations. I didn't really use any arpeggiations, which I probably should have. And then bring in my bass and my drums. Now, I got some good feedback from a very good friend of mine who gave me some great tips on how to improve the next track, so I'm hoping my next one will be much more impressive. But for now, we're going to just go over like what it is that I did to get to that final produced track. And then in part 3, we're going to do a live stream, which I will schedule for probably next Friday. Update will follow on the channel. And we will actually go live to discuss one-on-one, and you can ask me live questions about decisions that I made, and even give me suggestions if you want on how you think I can improve as well. So let's grow together and let's learn together. But I want to walk you through, this is going to be 2 projects. So the first project we're looking at here is the pre-finished project, the one that I was working on before I actually finished working on this and then actually sending it to export MIDI. So there's a lot of things that we're going to cover in this. And then in the second project I'm going to open, you'll just hear the finished product of what actually got exported. So there's a couple things I want to note going forward. First of all, I ended up changing quite a few of the patches that I was using. For example, I'm using the bottom feeder bass. Before I was using something else I don't remember the name of at the moment. I also ended up changing my pad to Miley's Virus, which I think is a really great pad. I did a little bit of tweaking on it, but for the most part, it's exactly as Omnisphere has it. I didn't change my synths at all otherwise, but ultimately in the last version also, I'm not using the drums. I'm not using addictive drums in the final produced product. I'm just using this as sort of just an underlying listening thing, because I'm not a big fan of the way Orb Composer currently handles drums. So with that in mind, I also want to talk about this, the curves, intensity, and momentum. I almost completely ignore this because I know what I want to do. Now, if you're not sure what you want to do, and maybe you have other ideas about what you want to do, for sure, do it your own way and do whatever feels most comfortable to you. But for me, I know exactly what I want from each and every clip. And so what I wanted to do is I wanted to slowly build from a soft piano or pianissimo to a mezzo forte, to a forte, and then once we reach this point, we're at forte, we're at full open. So there's a couple of tips I'm going to throw at you, and one of them, the first tips, is going to be how to do these dynamic changes. So let's open up this pad 1, and we're going to go to the dynamics, and you can see here you have very different dynamics. You have straight, crescendo, decrescendo, and then crescendo, decrescendo. So it kind of goes up and then down. And what I did for all of these was I started from piano and then worked my way up to, pianissimo, and then worked my way up to piano. And for those of you who aren't familiar with these terms, that just means very soft to slightly less soft. And then for the next section here, or for the next block, I went from piano to mezzo, and mezzo just means slightly loud or just sort of a medium dynamic. So for this one, we're going to set it to piano to mezzo. And then for the next block, again, we're just going to go from mezzo to forte, and mezzo to forte just means medium to loud, right? So this is block 2, and then medium to loud. So we're going to do mezzo to forte. And then we're going to go from here right up until we get to our lead. We're going to do forte to fortissimo. And then once we get to our lead, we're actually going to drop back. We're going to take some notes from pop music and just pull back. So what happens is once we get the lead coming in, even though in the future I probably won't be using lead instruments for these types of things, one of the suggestions I got was actually to try to create a melodic structure using chord progressions only and not really using lead synths for this type of music. But regardless of that, so we're going to go to mezzo forte for this one, straight mezzo forte. And then once the what I ended up doing is I ended up actually cutting the lead out from the transition block and then changing that here, this pad, to a fortissimo. And then actually I think I did fortissimo down to forte. So then this is where we're going to start going back down again. So right around here, we're going to stay at forte here for where the lead is here. And we're going to keep the dynamics at forte. And then we're going to start to pull back slowly right up until we're at nothingness. So that's so as the lead is here, again, just stay at forte. And we're just basically climbing from nothingness up to somethingness. So you're noticing here that it's actually not growing that much, and there's a reason for that. So one tip that I have, so this is using the mod wheel, which means it's using CC1, I believe is the mod wheel, if my memory serves correctly. And so what you can do, so while the track is playing, open up your instrument, and then right click on what you want. For this case, I want the cutoff. So I want the low pass filter cutoff. And I'm going to MIDI CC learn, and you're going to see that it's going to actually grab it. So here we go. So if we listen back to that again now with it controlling the mod wheel on the cutoff, you can actually hear how it grows much differently. So as you can hear, it actually is opening up that mod wheel control, and you're getting a lot more dynamic range out of it now. And we're going to do the same thing to the synth. The synth gets the same treatment. Okay, so while the track is playing, again, what you want to do is you want to go in there into your actual instrument and set the cutoff to MIDI CC learn. And you see now it's mapped to whatever Orb Composer is doing with the mod wheel. And you can do this for any other thing you want to as well. You can do it with resonance or anything like that. And I actually did change the resonance here on this one a little bit. And then another thing I did was also, again, we're doing the dynamics here, so I'll just go ahead and fast forward through that, doing the dynamic changes. So now you can hear the change here with that, and how that changed it as well. So as we're growing there, you can hear the cutoff just opening up. So that's what we want. And there's another problem with Orb Composer in this case, where for some reason the pads are playing in a really low register, and I don't know why. And what I would do is I switch it to medium, like this. And this may be a bug. It may be something that they're going to fix. I've reported it as a bug. But if I switch now and you listen to just the pad, it doesn't sound like it's in the medium range anymore. It sounds more like it's in a high range. But then if I switch it back to low and listen to it again, it's actually in a different range than it was before when it was on low. And this is the range that I actually wanted it at, was this sort of lowish range. But it was actually at the very low range, which for some reason it was saying low range, but it was playing in the very low range. And so I've actually had to go through, and for each track here, for each clip, I've had to switch it to medium and then switch it back to low. And that was a little bit tedious, and I really think that's a bug that needs to be corrected, because it really does slow down the process of what we're going for here. But with that in mind, I mean, these are just minor things that are easy to kind of work around. So we've changed the what was it, the register. Now we're going to change it back. Okay, so we do that for all of those clips, and I'll just fast forward through that process as well. And we're just going to go over this opening section, and then we'll go into the finished product next. So yeah, that's a very strange behavior from Orb Composer. I'm not really sure why it does that or what the cause of that is, but it has been reported, so hopefully it'll get fixed. But then the next thing we're going to discuss is polyphony. So for these synths, I really wanted it to have polyphony. And so for each of these blocks, I did add, I think it was 4 polyphony, or maybe for some of them it might have been 5. But mostly I think it was just 4 polyphony, and some of them it was just 3, just core blocks. But another thing I did was I didn't like the rhythms it was giving me. I don't like the complex rhythms. I wanted it to be a simple upbeat rhythm on the offbeats. So what I did is I also went into here and I switched to this section, which is the create a custom rhythm. And then I filled all the steps in, or I'm sorry, I filled in the, I filled in the steps, that's correct. And then every other eighth note is played. So you'll notice a significant difference now that it's got the polyphony and it's playing on the offbeats. Now, again, I don't want to go into too much detail with how I did every little thing in here. I think that kind of gives you the basic idea of how I controlled it. by adding polyphony, by changing the things like that. Now, as far as that goes, I like the way that bass sounds, and I really like the effect of the bass. But again, we want to do the dynamic changes like we did before. So for this, we started actually at a mezzo forte and worked our way up to forte to start with. So we started with that. And then we also did not do any sort of cutoffs or anything special with that. That actually is not something I did, which I maybe should have spent more time with, and layering as well. But that's something we'll cover in another video in a future episode, where we kind of go more in depth in how to get that sort of dead mousy type sound that I was going for, that I sort of swung and missed at. I think that for the most part, in the final track, around this section of the track, around the middle, is where it kind of hit pretty close to that feel, but there's still something lacking, and I think what's lacking is just enough layers and enough arpeggiations and really chord progressions as well, because one thing you'll notice is that in here there's a diminished chord, and it's really uncommon to use diminished chords. I really should have paid more attention to that. But yeah, I mean, I was just trying to just get a demo out for you guys to have a look at. So, you know, again, I apologize for the rushedness of it, but I do intend to spend quite a bit more time working on these types of tracks in the future so that you'll get better demos. So this is where I felt satisfied with the result that I got from Orb, that I felt that I could then take this to MIDI and then make something out of it. And so that's exactly what I did. I exported all of this, and we can jump in here and we can see some of the things that I ended up doing. The lead is at forte. I could have maybe done some more dynamic changes with that. There's some more things I could have done with that as well, but for the most part, we're at a point where I was happy, and I was happy enough to move on to the next step, which we will go over more in detail, but I'm not going to leave you hanging. So we're actually going to open up the project file in Studio One. So for the sake of keeping things very simple here, I'm just going to go over what I did now that I've brought it in. I'm not going to go over in too much detail because I want to go over in detail in a live stream. So I've turned off all master effects and effects on buses and things like that I had going, and on the instruments, and all I'm going to show you is just how we import the MIDI and how we get it started. So I've already set up my template here so that I have everything, you know, with bus tracks and channeled correctly. I have all the same synths mapped correctly that I was using before, so Omnisphere is using the same sounds that I was using in Orb Composer. So we're ready to move in the MIDI and start putting it all together as an actual track ready to go. Boy, Omnisphere loves to take forever to open. So yeah, we're ready to move forward with importing all of our MIDI. So let's go ahead and do that. So I know where I want everything to go. Obviously, bass is going to go right here on the bass. The drum kit's going to go here. The lead is going to go right here. And then the pad and the synth are going to go right where the pad and synth go, except no, they're in the right place. Okay. I thought they were swapped, but they're not. They're in the correct place. So that's exactly what we wanted. And now let's listen to it in Studio One. So right off the bat, you notice the drums are not playing anything. And that's because I'm using something called U-Beat Electro, which is not mapped to general MIDI for whatever reason. And so even though this actually did get changed in another project version, what I ended up doing was, and I'll just go ahead and back up to before I made all these edits and show you how I made my changes to the drums. So I moved all the drums and I remade all my drum patterns to just be downbeats in the kick for electro, and then also have the actual layer here. And that's kind of how I ended up using it, is just sort of muting some of those other ones there. And I probably could have spent more time picking out a better MIDI track there, but I was pretty satisfied with the way it sounded, so I don't want to tinker too much. When I'm happy, and I move on. I don't tend to stick around and fiddle about too much with things. I need to definitely spend more time on other things like layering and such, but for the most part, why are you not going? Go in there. Thank you. Okay. So what we have now, if we go back here with the drums where we left off there. So that's kind of a bit more powerful now with those drums, and also the sound of everything is getting a little bit muddy. There's some issues with EQ, and that's the kind of stuff I want to cover in the live stream. So I want to discuss, if you guys are open to it, let me know in the comments below if you're excited about the idea of a live stream, because I think that that's going to be fun to do together. Obviously the bass is missing from this. I forgot to pull it back in, but it doesn't matter. The point is that now we have everything here, and we're ready to go with our project, and move forward into the mastering phase, or preparing it for a rough master. I'm not a mastering engineer professionally, but I do the best I can with the tools that I have at my disposal, and that's the result that you heard. So I would like to be able to do more, and I'm going to keep studying and keep learning. But let's do a live stream together. I hope you enjoyed this video and you found it helpful. In the next video, it's going to be live streamed probably next Friday, or this coming Friday. I will schedule it so you'll be aware of it, and it'll also be announced on Facebook before it happens. So keep in touch. Thank you all so much for watching. I hope you found this video very helpful. If you did, leave us a like, subscribe, click on the icon on the screen Buy Now to go ahead and get your copy of Orb Composer if you haven't already. I'm Benjamin, Artistic Director of Hexachords, and I'll see you next time.